Okay, this is a topic that I find very interesting, and I'd like to talk about. Finally, it's one of these things that I like. I think it's really interesting from the perspective of. I have a bogey here. I'll remove it. There you go. So yeah, it's a thing that's kind of disgusting like that. More disgusting than a bogey, in my opinion. You know. So, but you know, it's funny to see how disgusting we are in reality. Even though we might not appear to be, but I believe that if you look closely, then you can tell these things. So the right and the left, you know, what are the right and the left? These two political currents, that they're everywhere, right? In all democracies they appear, and they're all fighting for power and so on. So let's have a look at what they are. I'd like to go to the kiosk over there and have a look at the news. There you go. So we can see this clearly. These are the headlines today, and these two you've got on the left the main. I think it's a pretty right-wing newspaper. On the right there's the left-wing newspaper, and they're both talking about the same issue from a different perspective. And this one is critical of the fact that the president has just decided to approve some decrees that give lots of rights to people with a low income, and regarding housing rights, and regarding some paternity rights and things like that. You know, things about equality, gender equality, and all these lefty things that they like so much, and all these little, you know, gifts that they're giving to people, all these little goodies that everybody likes. So he's approved all these measures to give stuff to people, you know, who are begging for it. So this one is the social measures approved by the president, basically. So the story right now is that you know, I have been checking out this situation since I got here. I didn't know anything about it because I've been living abroad. But basically the situation is that there's been a right-wing government for a few years. I don't know how many, but they've been, you know, the president has been one of the right-wing people, right-wing party, you know, whatever the name is. So the Popular Party. So they're you know, they're right-wing, and they're concerned with the rights to your own property and to your own business and so on. Yet the name of the party is for the people, you know. So that's kind of paradoxical, but that's kind of how these things are. They're not very honest like that. So yeah, this guy has been in power for many years, and then he's been replaced by a left-wing president, because these things just alternate all the time like that, right? So this new president has only lasted in power a few months. I think it's been the smallest period in the history of Spanish democracy. So you know, what happened is people are getting all, they're all very anxious about these things. Everybody is getting very, very anxious. The economy is not really gonna last. You know, all this frenzy of you know, trying to direct resources in one way or the other is not going to last very long. People fighting over resources, so they obviously run out. So this is not going to last very long. So it's already beginning to become a real mess. Finally, the president had to renounce his position because he tried to, they made, how do you call it, the budget, for the next year, and it was not approved by the parliament, so they had to, the president just couldn't get enough confidence from the parliament, so he had to renounce his job. So that's what made his presidency so short. So anyway, what happens now is that because he's had to call for elections, new elections on all this, so we can have a government here, a functioning government. So while we wait for elections, he's decided to approve all these laws or decrees or whatever they are to give people goodies, like, for example, there's a big housing problem in Spain because we don't have enough houses, you see, like we really don't. There's not been really a lot of construction going on in this country in the last 50 years. So you know what I mean. So I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm with the other team. Like the others are the same. As I said in the beginning, they're called the Popular Party anyway. So they'll be fighting with the first ones because they want to protect the right of owners. In this case, for example, to set their own prices. They want to liberalize the market so that the owners of houses can set their own prices. So they have a fight, and they're fighting, and so what they do is they vote and relieve each other in power. So when the lefties are in power, they vote laws like this guy, like he's in the last minute even, to try and help the campaign. In the last minute, they approve all these laws to give people houses, to make it easier for people to have to rent houses or whatever, people who have low income. And then, if the other party wins, then they'll just cancel those laws, and just liberalize the market again in some way, and just allow people to set their own prices, which will benefit the owners and not benefit the workers. So, but anyway, I don't want to sound like I like the liberalization, because they're not really liberalizing anything. They might liberalize that, but on the other hand, they will. The reason we have a housing problem is that they will make other kinds of laws that protect businessmen. So in this case, it would be, for example, the tourism business. You'll have a law that says that you're allowed to make lots of profit in this area of land, and you're allowed to build lots of hotels and places, and they're not going to be for local people, they're going to be for foreigners. So that's fine, you can make all the profit you want with that, and obviously people will invest. Obviously people they know and all their friends are going to invest in hotel companies and all that kind of thing, because they know that the law is protecting their interests. So that's fine, so they have their little scheme for profiting. So meanwhile, there are other places in Spain that are for the locals, So in those places, you have all these kind of controls on the profits that owners can make, because the houses should be for the locals. So you have the two schemes working separately. And obviously, if there's so much profit in building touristic houses, then clearly nobody's going to build houses for the locals, or not many people are going to invest in that, and so there's going to be a shortage. So there's an excess of houses for tourists. You could say a shortage of houses for locals. So there's going to be. So anyway, these two things work together. You see, they work together. So they alternate in power as well to benefit each kind of economic agent in turn. So, for example, they'll be fighting over the rentals, but they're not fighting over. They're not saying, for example, let's convert a hotel into houses for locals. You know, so they still respect each other's field, because in the end of the day, the main thing that they agree on is the unity of the country. So they always want to stay together, you know, and respect the Magna Carta and the Constitution and the democracy and all this crap. So this is because it serves both of them, you know. And it's if you protect the workers and you do something like I described before with the houses for the workers and for the locals, then you'll get voted in, and then you can do business with the hotels, and vice versa. Just to be clear, you know, by vice versa, I mean that if you get voted in as a member of the other party that will defend the interests of businessmen to create jobs. Let's create jobs, you know. So that they want to build hotels, for example, and they get voted in for that. They convince people that they're going to create jobs and it's going to benefit the economy, they're going to be responsible with the economy and so on. Then basically they'll make lots of money, benefit their friends and so on, while at the same time gaining a lot of popularity. That's why they're called the Popular Party. They're not, even though they're right-wing. And they defend exclusivity and, you know, inequality and all these things that the left don't like. So they're complementary things. They're both the same guys, different two sides of the same coin. So why does this happen? You know, so one way to see it is the video that I released a couple of days ago, whatever it was, 2-3 days ago. I can link it here if I find out how to do it. In which I describe the case of a beggar who comes to me and is asking for money, and he says that he wants the money for food. A typical thing you find in the streets. You can see how this thing works at the most basic level. In that case, he plays, as a beggar, he's trying to elicit the caring person in me that will feel pity for him and give him money. Right? But I have that side, and then I also have the responsible side, you know, that will say to him, the daddy side, right? That will say to him, well, get a life, you know. I remember saying in the video, he could very well, you know, why are you begging like this? And when we have opportunities and you could get a job, and you know, if you're begging like this, then it probably is your own responsibility, and you should have studied, you should have done X, Y, and Z. It is not my responsibility to give you, to provide for you. You're an adult, and so on and so forth. So usual, very, very common arguments. And then on the other hand, the caring side will be saying, oh well, you don't know why he ended up like that. It might not be his fault. Some people do not have the same opportunities. They cannot, you know, they have disadvantages. It's not their fault, and so on. So that would be the caring side. That would be the lefty side. You know, let's provide houses for people that cannot afford them, and so on. It's not their fault if they cannot afford them, and so on. And let's fight the selfish businessmen. But of course, the selfish businessmen are themselves, because, as I said before, you know, get into power, and they just make a law so that you can do business elsewhere, like with hotels and stuff like that. And they protect business on the one hand, while on the other hand they give little goodies to the beggars to keep them quiet. So in both senses, they're fostering, they're kind of incentivizing begging on the one hand, to stay poor and to just keep begging because it works, and on the other hand incentivizing addictions, because when you set up a hotel because you want more money and you want to get more and produce more, and you know, rather than build houses for the needy, as a builder, or as a, you know, construction businessman, you decide to build hotels because, you know, tourists can afford to pay more, and so you build a hotel instead of houses for the needy. But you need a law that will establish your right to do business like that, and to dedicate land to hotels instead of houses for locals. So the two things work together. And as you can see, they're not really talking about, they're not really getting into the issue of tourism and how tourism takes land and resources. They're not debating that. They're debating how in the local areas there's no houses for locals. They're not talking about there are no houses for locals in the touristic areas. You know, so we have that division to provide income for both types of people. I mean, for the both expressions of the same kind of exploitative individual that goes into government. So, I mean, and I don't mean to blame them in the same way as they blame, because this is a thing that is an addiction. And as I explained in that video, the person who begs, the beggar, is just testing the people on the street to be honest, and they're not. Most people are not honest. You know, they'll say, they'll either respond by saying, you're responsible, you are responsible, and they won't give him any money, and they'll refuse, or they'll respond by giving him money and feeling pity for him. So they're both quite automatic responses, and they have to deal with morality, moral obligation and guilt, and so on. You can either feel the obligation and the guilt and give him money, or you can feel the same thing. You can sort of rebel against it and have a reaction against it, where you because you don't like to feel obligated by this man who's just coming to you out of nowhere and asking you for money. You then react and say, you know, it's not my job to care for you. I pay my taxes, and go and ask the people who do this, and so on. And, you know, the whole situation leaves you completely powerless as to an explanation as to why these things happen. But that's because the explanation is not in politics, and it's not really in the fact that we need it's not at that level. It's at a more basic level.